you guys had a wonderful weekend and that you had a good Monday. We are today in 1 Peter 4. Michael is getting up from behind me. I think he realizes that he was in the shot or that I started filming, so he's like, gotta go. Anyways, so 1 Peter 4, and we're going to cover verse 1 to 6, I believe. That's it. So a little short section, but an awesome section. Verse 1. So since Christ suffered in the flesh, you also arm yourselves with the same attitude, because the one who has suffered in the flesh has finished with sin, in that he spends the rest of his time on earth concerned about the will of God and not human desires. I love that verse. And not in the sense that I'm excited about suffering in my flesh, but I love the fact that it's just encouraging. You know, the Christian walk, if we're really wanting to live the true, authentic Christian walk, we're going to have a lot of suffering. You know, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard. There's going to be days where we're discouraged, where we're frustrated, where we're might even endure some physical suffering. I know for myself and for a lot of us, I'm sure it's not that we're getting beaten or tortured for our beliefs in God, but just kind of those days where you're just frustrated or things are really hard to really do what God's calling you to do. But I'm so encouraged by these verses in the sense that if we're willing, I just take the suffering, you know, I know it's talking about suffering in the flesh, but suffering just in going through it for living for Christ, that if we're willing to do that, then we've gotten to a point where we're not, you know, continuing on and being focused on the things of this world and the lusts of this world, and we're just focused on, you know, doing the will of God. And how awesome is that, to be able to have gone from focusing on the world and the desires of our flesh and just wanting to party and do what we know our flesh longs to do. But to be able to go from that to desiring to do the will of God no matter how hard it is. And that's just, I'm so excited about that. Even though it is hard, but it's exciting. So, anyways, moving on, verse 3. Verse 3. For the time that has passed was sufficient for you to do what the non-Christians desired. You lived in the debauchery, evil desires, drunkenness, carousing, drinking bouts, and wanton idolatries, so that they are astonished when you do not rush with them into the same flood of wickedness, and they vilify you. This, Peter is pretty much saying, hey, you know, the time that we lived before we surrendered to God was enough, you know, enough of, you know, the drinking, the, you know, carousings, the getting, you know, going around and doing the stuff, following our flesh and putting other things, you know, the wanton idolatries of putting other things, you know, before the Lord, and following our evil desires. That time is past. And now that we've, you know, given our lives to the Lord, now it's time to be, you know, about the will of God, what God desires to do in our lives. And I just love this passage of scripture. I was in it all weekend. I just kept reading it and just was so ministered to by it, because I was kind of going through it was a hard weekend. It was just, I was discouraged, just really having this discouraged weekend, and I just kept reading these verses, and I was so encouraged in the sense, like I just rambled on about, you know, for 2 minutes, but just encouraged by how, you know, the Bible does talk about suffering and trials and things that we're going to go through. And I don't know why, but I'm so encouraged by that when it mentions that, just that we're not to be surprised at these trials, and that in doing the will of God, it's going to be rough sometimes. So anyways, be encouraged, ladies, that the time of following our flesh is over, and the time of following the Lord and following His will for our lives is now, and it's exciting. Yes, it's going to be difficult. You're going to have your difficult weekends or days like I had this last weekend, But it's so worth it, because when we're following after the will of God, we're going to have so much peace and joy and fulfillment, and it's just going to so far outweigh those difficult moments of discouragement and frustration. So let's be encouraged and just continue to pursue the will of God for our lives. Verse 5. They will face a reckoning before Jesus Christ, who stands ready to judge the living and the dead. Now it was for this very purpose that the gospel was preached to those who are now dead, so that though they were judged in the flesh by human standards, they may live spiritually by God's standards. So verse 5, what Peter is saying, he's just saying that these people that vilify you and that are astounded when you don't rush off with them into, doing the, following of your evil desires and just partying and all those things like you used to do, they're going to be astonished. But then they're not only going to be astonished, he says that, hey, they just might vilify you, would make you out to be the bad guy. And which may happen, as you change your life over and decide to say, hey, no, I'm not going to follow after what my flesh is wanting to do. I'm going to follow after the Lord. And you may get, pointed out to be the bad guy for doing that by some of your friends or people you hung out before. And then verse 5 is pretty gnarly. Peter says they will face a reckoning before Jesus Christ for that. So that's also encouraging in the sense of we don't need to try to, judge them or have a reckoning with them and us. Here it says that, they will face a reckoning before Jesus Christ. So don't be, surprised if you are painted out to be not a great person when you change your life radically for the Lord. But don't worry about it. If people start saying things and spreading rumors about you, just give it over to the Lord. So I know I rambled on a lot, but I was just so encouraged by this portion of scripture this weekend. It just blessed me so much. So ladies, if you're going through a hard time ever because you're following the will of God for your life, be encouraged. Be encouraged, and to know that yes, we're going to have hard times, but just keep going and cry out to him, and he'll give you the grace and the strength to get through it, to where you're at the point where you're praising him in the midst of your trials. And let's continue on seeking the will of God for our lives. Love you so much, and have a wonderful evening. See you tomorrow.
With no warning, the ship is sinking.